minute, Adriel, to give everybody kind of a sense of what we're going to do.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you. And for those that just joined, I mentioned this is a little bit of an experiment. And so we appreciate your patience. We appreciate your expertise that you all bring. Lauren, instead of doing introductions right now, we're gonna do it live, so you'll get a chance to know everybody. Adriel will talk a little bit, and then when she turns the time over to me, I'm going to ask each of you to take, I'd said a minute or two, take 2 to 3 minutes. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know some of you would take the whole 3 minutes to talk about yourself. But, tell us kind of like, as you see it, what are the top line issues, or what do you want to make sure people know or understand about this in case there's not a question? I guess another way to look at it is if there are no questions that cover something, what do you want to make sure is covered? And take 2 or 3 minutes with that, and we'll go around and do that. And then we'll just jump into questions. And I have some questions ready to ask. I'm not sure, it's hard to know what our listeners will things, but I've got some that I'll run through with you after we do that, and then we'll open it up to questions. I'll also just mention we don't quite know what to expect about questions unrelated to this topic, and Adriel's kind of in charge of whether or not we let those in. We may take the last 10 minutes or so of it. If we want to know about the Supreme Court nomination or something like that, we may do that, but we'll stick to this topic as much as we can. Does that sound good? Any questions about that? And let's go. I don't know if you can remember this order, but I'm just going to kind of go the order you're in my screen to introduce yourself. So Steve, Ross, Laren, Brad, and Kate.
Okay.
First.
I'm
Good to go.
All right, we're ready.
So he'll bring in when he wants. Okay.
I'm going to let all of you run your own muting. Okay. So just keep yourselves muted if you're not talking, and it'll be a lot easier. I'm not going to mute you unless you talk too long. Just kidding. Okay. All right. Are we ready? Are we ready to start?
We are ready.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Oh yeah. We have people getting on now too. So, welcome everyone to tonight's town hall with Congressman Curtis. This is our live virtual event, and we appreciate everyone taking the time to be engaged and to be informed. And the fact that you've joined the meeting this evening, it demonstrates your commitment to our state and to our nation. And we thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all you do. I'm Adrielle Herring, and I'll be your host for the virtual town hall this evening. Congressman Curtis has held a number of these virtual meetings in 2020 and will continue to do these events. We hope that they're useful and informative to you. As you know, the Congressman is known for his frequent town halls, and with the challenges that we face just getting people together, it's more important than ever to him to stay connected with all of you and to hear from you and to answer your questions and to hear your perspectives. So in a few moments, he's going to introduce our panelists for tonight's discussion. But first, before we go to that panel discussion, I would just like to talk to you a little bit about the format for the meeting and how you can participate and ask questions. So, as I said, it'll be a panel discussion on affordable housing this evening. And at the end of the panel discussion, we'll take your questions. You don't need to confine your questions to affordable housing. Any topics are fair game. And I encourage you to submit your questions early, especially if they're off the topic of affordable housing, so that I'll be able to sort of gauge how much time we need for the other questions and how much time we have for our panel discussion. So let me tell you how to submit a question. If you'd like to do that, it's easy. Just type your questions in the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And just be sure to post your question in Q&A and don't post it in the chat, because I'll be taking the questions from the Q&A. So once you've typed your question, you can just listen to the conversation while you wait for your turn. Now, this evening, because we'll just have a few minutes at the end for your questions, I'm going to sort of try to get a sense of, what the themes of the questions are. And instead of turning it over to you to ask a question, I'll give the congressman an idea of here's a topic and here are some of the questions on the topic and let him talk to that for a few minutes. So if you can get your questions in so that I can sort of start getting organized for that, that would be great. So once again, this is a live session. And for those of you who have just joined in the last minute or two, welcome to the event. We're glad you can join us. If you have a question that you want to submit, we'll be answering your questions at the end after this panel discussion. All you need to do to ask your question is type it in the Q&A box in the bottom right hand of your screen. And be sure to post it in Q&A, not in chat. All right. Congressman Curtis, would you like to take it away?
Thank you, Adriel. Appreciate your help. A big thank you to those who've joined us, and a special big thanks to our panelists. What we want to do today is start by hearing from each of our panelists. Rather than me doing an introduction on them, I've been given a lengthy bio on all of them. They're all amazingly accomplished and bring very different perspectives to this affordable housing question. So we've got these 5 very unique perspectives, plus my own, that we want to share on this. So I've asked them all to take a few minutes and tell us first about themselves, and then what they would have us hear about affordable housing. And after we've done that, we'll start working on the questions. So I'm going to go first to Steve, and then we're going to go around. And Steve, if you'd start off, please.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Daly, a custom home builder in the Salt Lake Valley, have been for about 34 years. Current president of the Utah Home Builders Association. And I guess my piece of it tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about the lumber cost escalation that's hit us recently and the effect that's having on home ownership and on the home building industry. Just a brief overview. I've reached out to a number of production builders in the area to get some stats and some of their feeling on the cause and effect of the lumber price increase. Most, if not all, production builders, and most production builders by definition, are going to be in the first time or first move up market. Have in the last probably 60 days been forced to raise home prices by $15,000 per unit or more. And some of them are approaching the $30,000 mark. And they expect those price increases to keep coming for the next few months as the supply chain, the lumber that they're purchasing at a high price today, the lag in the supply chain could be as much as 60 days out. So we're looking at prices increasing and probably staying high at least through the end of the year based on what the market is today and not understanding where it's going tomorrow or the day after that. So we don't see any relief coming before the end of the year. One of the other things that a big effect that's having in our market here locally is costs are being driven more by the supply and demand economics than they are by the current situation with lumber price index happening in the commodities market. If you've been in the commodities market this year and you happen to have some money in lumber, you've done very well. It's the top performing raw material in the U.S. today. But part of the problem that we have here in our area is the supply and demand. Our demand is outstripping the supply chain. It can't keep up. They've raised prices to a point that we've set record highs, and yet we're still buying the material and they can't supply it fast enough. There's no incentive for the suppliers to reduce that cost at this point, and it's going to take some major reversal or change in the market to change that supply and demand economics to bring that cost down. I think one of the most interesting statistics, a study from the National Association of Home Builders, states that for every $1,000 a home price increases, that removes 130,000 households from the housing market. It prices them out of the market. So when we're talking about homes increasing in price by $15,000 to $30,000 here in our area, It really becomes an irrelevant situation if the first $1,000 takes you out of the market. From my niche, my piece of the market as a custom builder, we talk about affordable housing. My piece of the market is not so much affordable housing, but it is still painful. I have a client today who we signed a contract 3 months ago, and as of today, their lumber package has increased by $70,544. And that's not complete yet. So it's painful. It's tough for everybody in the market. We still have no idea what's going to happen from today forward because of that lag in the supply chain. But we are hopeful that come spring and a bit of a downturn in the production, seasonal downturn in the production will help.
Thank you, Steve. Ross?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. This is really cool that you do this, and thank you for letting us have a part of it. And it's fun to talk to all your constituents, and hopefully we'll bring them some useful information. I got my contractor's license mid-90s. I started working on construction sites way before it's legal, so we won't discuss that tonight. But I've spent my whole life in construction. After working as a contractor for years and years and years, I got an opportunity to work for the Home Builders Association. So I represent the state of Utah, the Home Builders Association. So I get to deal with all the builders and work through all the issues. So this evening, what I wanted to talk about is the cost of housing and kind of the crisis we're facing. And I think bigger than a lot of people understand as this builds up. And one of the things that we see that really hits it is the cost of regulation. So just real quick, there's a national study that shows the cost of regulation on a new home is 25% of the house. Now, by my estimations, and I don't have an exact study, I would argue that Utah's a little above that. We're probably closer to 30%. But even if we look at it at the 25%, if you are buying a $350,000 home, which is not a mansion by any stretch here in Utah, any of you that have been out looking for homes, that means that the regulatory cost on that home is $87,500. So if we eliminated all the regulation, you could have that home for $87,000 less, which is significant. So that number are the quantifiable costs. There's a whole bunch of unquantifiable costs that go with that number, and they're not figured into it. So one of the things is a lot of times regulation comes with a time delay as well. Well, that cost to wait impacts your interest. It will disrupt the schedule of the builder. And so they end up they were going to be able to have the next subcontractor in place next week, but because there was some sort of a regulatory delay that held them off, they may lose that subcontractor and they may not get them back for 3 weeks. And again, that increases that cost and it's not really quantified in these numbers. Again, that delay, you can miss closing dates, you can miss interest locks. And in Utah, because we're right now seeing we're going to get a little bit colder here tonight, a lot of our construction is in areas where we see snow. If you get delayed, which we see right now, builders that have been delayed with some regulatory cost for 6 or 8 weeks, now they have a home that they would have built in good weather. They're going to have to build in snow, and that's really costly. So quick overview, that's where I am. Hopefully there are questions on that and we can get into it deeper, but that takes care of that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Larry, before we go ahead, let me just mention that we've got Dave Robinson that just joined us. You'll know Dave because it says Whitney Booth on his screen. So that's Dave. And Dave, we're introducing ourselves. We've got you on last to take 2 or 3 minutes. So Larry, would you go ahead?
You bet. Thank you, Congressman. Larry Little with Capstone Real Estate, broker owner for about 26 years now. I just want to echo what Steve and Ross have said. It seems like a perfect storm out there hitting affordable housing right now, and everywhere between regulation and challenges with local and state regulation are very difficult. I'm glad they hit on that. It seems I work with a lot of builders and developers, and between impact fees and off-site exactions and just not necessarily being friendly towards affordable housing, which usually entails higher density, it seems like there's lots of associated with that at the local and the state level. And not to mention the market forces that are in play right now. I represent lots of buyers that are in that what might be considered affordable range, 250 to 350 range, and right now it sure is difficult for those folks. Just the lack of supply. There's not much inventory out there, and there is a ton of demand. I haven't worked with a buyer in that price range for months that hasn't been dealing with 10 to 15 competing offers on any given property, and those buyers have to be willing to bid up the price anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 more than the asking price, and a lot of those folks just can't do that, and oftentimes they're competing with investors who come in and sweep up those properties. But those are all factors that are affecting the market right now. At the federal level, Congressman, I do want to give a shout out to you and a thanks for the work that you're doing. Just the fact that you're willing to have a town hall meeting like this indicates your care and concern about this issue. Not to mention, I want to thank you for co-sponsoring HR 3077, which is the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, tongue tire. Senator Hatch, in his last term before he finished, was able to get a small expansion with the number of housing tax credits that are afforded to states, but that was a temporary expansion. We're looking for a much more permanent expansion, and this bill is one that would do that for us. It would give us a more permanent expansion for that program. I work with Utah Housing Corporation, who's given the responsibility to regulate and to distribute those housing credits. And I can tell you that annually there's hundreds of affordable rental units that are built in the state because of that program. And having more credits available to builders and developers is critical to ensuring the success of that program. And those housing projects, they cater to the citizens that are making 30 to 80% of the area median income. And so being able to provide those units to those folks is critical. And so I want to thank you for that, for working on that bill, and encourage you to continue pushing on that and hopefully get the permanent increase to those housing credits would be great.
Thanks, Lauren. Appreciate it. Brad?
Okay, thank you, Congressman Curtis. I'm grateful to be here with you and have enjoyed our friendship over the years. I'm Brad Simons. I'm with Magleby Construction. I also serve on a board back in DC, the Home Builders Institute, which is a skilled labor training program, and I serve on the board of the National Association of Home Builders. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the impact of the lack of skilled labor. Believe it or not, we are in the middle of a pandemic. Unemployment is as high as we've seen it in years, and yet there are 300,000 job openings in the construction industry right now. And what happens when there's job openings, that many job openings, is that the wages go up, construction slows down because people can't get to the job sites to do the work. And when construction slows down, that increases the interest, the carry cost, and the management cost of that site. So I'm like Steve. We build very high-end custom homes, but I'm calling in today right from a neighborhood that's bustling with construction, probably has 30 homes under construction right now from various builders, and they're all taking much longer to build because there's a labor crisis. And so what causes the labor crisis? The labor crisis is partly because for decades we've been telling our kids that they shouldn't become skilled workers. They should go to college and get an education and become a lawyer or a doctor. And so we have a dearth of people trained in skilled labor, which they can still make really, really good wages at. Great entry point to own your own business, ease of entry. So that's one area. Another area is especially right now, the foreign workers, the skilled foreign workers who have been coming here legally for years are unable to obtain visas right now because the number of work visas have been decreased dramatically. And so they're sitting in their country, unable to come and help us where they've been coming for years on these visas in a legal fashion. And so that has created some stress on the labor side. With those 300,000 openings, there are programs coming that are working. HBI has programs in high schools, military bases, Job Corps centers, and they're expanding those as rapidly as possible. There's a builder group that's opening up academies throughout the country on their own dime to help train skill-based workers. And the governor's office has a program called Pathways that they're currently rolling out into Utah, Wasatch, and Summit counties. That's a mentoring program for high school kids that want to be in the construction industry. So there are some solutions on the table to rebalance this labor crisis, but all of those take a lot of time and they have to work through the system. And so the immediate need is just not going to be met. And we'll continue to see a lot of price pressures on the wages in the construction industry. Magleby just completed a study and went through and looked at the wages, and the wage pressures are extremely great in Utah and for our own employees. And so we're having to adjust right now our own employees' compensation to make sure we're marketable. And we've always tried to stay on top of that. So the fact that we're a little behind was concerning. That's how fast it's growing. And so those adjustments are being made, but all that adds to the cost of the new construction and homes for our clients. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. Kate, you've been really patient. We're so glad to have you with us. Please go ahead.
I'll be quick. So my name is Kate. I work for the Utah Association of Realtors as the Government Affairs Director. And that association has about 17,000 members. And I help with policy, but also initiatives and different areas of policy focus. And we've been working on affordable housing for the last 3 years. And one of the things that we're really focusing on is the investment in our future and how much that has to do with affordable housing. We obviously care if there are homes available now because we'd like to be able to help people get into a home, but we also care about the effects of not having a home on the future. And so about 15% of Utah's kids are considered homeless, and that means they don't have a permanent address. And about 13,000 of those live in overcrowded homes. And that means that they have 2 families to a home, or there are a larger number of grandparents or aunts and uncles who live with them because housing is so expensive. And the impacts of the cost of housing right now have long-reaching effects. For example, several studies show that if kids don't have a permanent address and their parents aren't able to invest in their education, then they can feel that salary burden and that lack of opportunity later on. And so they'll earn less than their peers. And that's generally because parents need to have some extra cash on hand to pay for tutors, to pay for after-school activities, to set aside money for college funds and even ACT prep and things like that. And with 1 in 8 Utahns, and this is pre-pandemic, spending almost 50% of their salaries on homes, they just don't have that extra cash laying around. And so we care not only about the homes that exist right now, but also about the effect that the lack of those homes will have on our future economy here in Utah and on the future market. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to talk a little about today and share some information about. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kate. I want to call you Whitney, but Dave, bring us home, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Yes, I'm Utah Dave, not Whitney. Apparently there was some issue with my email. It wouldn't let me log in. So Whitney gave me her email to log in. So that's why I'm Whitney today.
Okay.
Last time I saw you, Congressman Curtis, it was at a Jazz game before you won your election, sat next to you. And so it's good to see you in the seat. Thank you for your service. I'm president of the Utah Association of Realtors. And we're in quite the housing crisis right now. We're short 54,000 homes, even though we've added a record number of housing units last year. And the thing about this is it's getting worse in a really big way. And one of the examples of a statistic that I like to share with people is in any given year across the Wasatch Front, the number or the most amount of homes that were pending in the year was about 6,500. So only 1 month out of the entire year was 6,500 homes pending. Right now, we are sitting at a 5-month time frame of 8,000 homes every single month for the last 5 months across the Wasatch Front have been pending, and that's pretty massive. And that a lot of that is a result of people coming into the state. And so our 54,000 home shortage is increasing at a tremendous rate right now. And the effects that it has on people is I help my daughter, who's just a young 25-year-old who bought a condo, first-time homeowner, for $220,000 last year. And that same condo, the builder is now selling for $270,000. I can't think of a worse situation where our first-time home buyers are trying to buy a home for $270,000, and then you have HOA fees on top of that. And when we're in that situation, we just have a lot of people that can't afford homes. So 1 out of every 8 families are spending about 50% of their income on housing. And when you have 1 out of 8 spending their income on housing, 50% of their income on housing, you're just one financial emergency away from them being homeless. So we have an extreme issue going on right now with that same condo I was telling you about that's now $270,000. 10 years ago, you could buy it for $90,000 10 years ago. So that's a triple price on someone trying to just get a first-time home. So we just have a real need for the not only the public to understand about the essential in housing, but also the cities and others, that it's critical to our health as far as our future economy. It's critical to our education, and it's critical for people to not feel strapped for us to overcome this issue. Thank you, Congressman Curtis.
Okay, great. Thanks to all of you. I've been actually richly informed just with our comments. Let's jump into questions, and I'm going to call on Adriel. Adriel, do you want to read the questions?
Yeah, the first question that I think is really important to answer, Congressman, is this a federal issue?
So I actually was cheating and scrolled ahead and looked at the questions that Adriel was going to ask, and I was really hoping that we'd actually ask this one first, because as I was listening to all of you, I made some notes about issues that were federal, and I will tell you there are a lot of layers in this. Some of them are very local, and I hope we talk about those in local government and private business. And there are some issues for federal government, and I think particularly, as was mentioned, this 300,000 worker shortage. Let me tell you several roles I think the federal government has in this. The first is really glaring right now, because in the COVID debate about additional relief, one of the main items we're debating is extra unemployment insurance. And it's about $600 in addition to regular unemployment insurance. And I know for a fact that as the builders are trying to recruit people, they're hearing this: I can make more money staying home than I can coming back to work. And that's a really good example of the federal government meddling and actually making it worse than before we started. And so this COVID legislation that we're looking at right now, some would have us extend that $600. And I think my personal belief is that would directly impact your workforce and make it harder to recruit. Second category in this 300,000 workers are visas, and it was brought up by our panelists that this is something under the control of the federal government. We've got a situation where we have, in your case, 300,000 jobs. You take that across other industries, and that is magnified many, many times. And we do have people, many people, who are willing to come to this country without U.S. citizenship, work hard, pay taxes, obey every law, and then go back home. And we're keeping those people from connecting with you. And I think that's just a terrible mistake. We're hurting ourselves because of this policy of not finding a way for them to come in and work in the United States. Let me just mention quickly, I've got a bill that I'm trying to get some momentum behind that is a state worker visa that would actually give extra visas to states to allocate where they could use extra workers. And just quickly, one of the beauties of the bill is at the end of the year, if a state can't be accountable for where those workers are, meaning they've come in and gotten lost, they get less visas the next year. If they can account for those workers and they're still legal and they're paying taxes and doing everything right, they get additional visas. So there's a couple of real examples of, yes, the federal government does have a role in this. And I think, Lauren, you mentioned the bill that you are pleased that we're supporting, yet another example of our role. So although the federal government doesn't have the ability just to make this go away, we do have a role. All right, Adriel, sorry I took so long on that. What's our next question?
Before I ask the next question, we've had a lot of people join since I gave instructions. Anyone who has a question, just go ahead and enter it into the Q&A box down in the right-hand corner. Don't put it in the chat. I'm not reading the chat for questions. I'm reading the Q&A for questions. So put your questions there. Okay. The next question that we'll talk about, what can be done for missing middle housing? Building as we have been isn't working. We end up subsidizing employees who work in our cities to live elsewhere, and we lose out on tax revenue, property taxes. What can be done?
And I'm going to bet we could spend the whole remaining half hour right on this one. I'm just going to let you all, our host, volunteer and see who'd like to take a swing at this one. Okay, I'm going to call on you if you don't. Kate, why don't you list, just a couple of things off the top of your head, and I'm going to tease this a little bit and talk about zoning, and because I know you all struggle sometimes with local government and zoning. Kate, do you want to tackle that from either a zoning or an otherwise perspective that you think would be helpful, or is there anybody else that wants to tackle that zoning question?
I can get us started. So the Utah legislature passed SB 34 last year, which gave local municipalities a number of things that they needed to accomplish in order to have an up-to-date moderate income housing plan. And those ranged all the way from zoning and requirements and lowering impact fees and building by transit stations and things like that. And that was a really, really good start to making sure that cities understood exactly where they lacked the moderate or affordable housing and where they could do better. But I think that one of the things that is a huge inhibitor to this is what we call NIMBY, or not in my backyard. And that is something that is just a mindset that we have to learn how to change and educate our neighbors. Because, and I think it stems a lot from some of the conversations we had in the 90s and the early 2000s about high density and crime and some of those studies. And what they've found since then is that when affordable housing is integrated into a community, and I'm going to give Vineyard a shout out because that's where I live and I've seen them do a really good job with this. So shout out to Julie Fulmer, our mayor, and the council. They did a great job. But when you have apartments and townhomes and single family homes and retirement homes, which we all have here in Vineyard within like a 15-mile radius, you really create a community that can depend on each other. It's when you leave affordable housing all on its own, when you leave high density housing all on its own, and you don't give them access to a community structure where there are recreation activities in your city, or there are neighbors that you can go to for help, or that you even just have examples of the ways that you can move up economically or move up housing wise, then they don't do as well. But when you integrate all of these things, you don't have that higher crime that comes with density. And so that's just like a huge misconception that we need to to work with each other to try to dispel. And one of the things that made me laugh is that my neighbors we've all come to Vineyard within the last probably 7 years, and there are thousands of us. And one of the common complaints is, I really want a Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is so far away from me. Well, to get a Chick-fil-A, you have to have people who live here. And to work at that Chick-fil-A, you have to have people who live here. And the same goes for the movie theater. So we're all interdependent on each other. All of our local economies are, and we can all really lift each other up and help each other when it's integrated. We can't just put affordable housing across the freeway and say, good luck. That is a bad move. But to zone it within our communities and to really have this will make everything better, I think.
Let me just throw in to your point. I learned as mayor, what we're really talking about is housing for school teachers, police officers, right? And many people who work in these critical jobs in our communities and just can't afford the housing that's out there. So when we eliminate, the question was kind of like this mid-range housing, or when we eliminate that, when we eliminate affordable housing, we're really saying that our school teachers, our police officers, our firefighters have to live someplace else in community and town. And it's really unfortunate. Anybody else on that want to weigh in on that? Or?
Yeah, could I throw in something, Congressman? So you and I met on a Habitat for Humanity ribbon cutting. We did several of those together, but honestly, affordable housing is a huge challenge, especially in Utah. I was in Nashville a few weeks ago, and South Carolina. Their prices are much lower than they are here in Utah, but they have a lot more available land. We in Utah, especially across the Wasatch Front, are landlocked, and the federal government owns a ton of land. And so because land is so limited, it becomes more valuable. And I don't know how we break that. But you go out to these other areas and you see what the housing costs are, and it really is because their land is so much less expensive than ours. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Good. So that brings up this density issue. And I hear many of you say, look, we can solve this if we can just go higher density. And this is where I sense you get a lot of resistance from local governments sometimes in increasing density. Any of you want to talk about how increasing density could help us out here? I'm going to toss this one at Ross.
I was going to say, I'll jump in on this one for just a second. And density is always a scary issue. And was it Kate that said the NIMBY? And a lot of us, me included, get nervous when they say, well, here, we're going to build this big apartment complex in your backyard. And what's it going to do to my community, to traffic, to crime, to a lot of that thing. So there are concerns. A lot of times when we say density, we immediately go to some big apartment building. But a lot of times what builders want when they do density, they don't necessarily going to build some high-rise condo project, but they want to bring houses in with smaller lots, which the interesting thing is builders do and developers, they do a really good job staying in close touch with what the consumer wants. And so old guys like me are constantly looking at their neighbors, waiting for them to sell so I can buy their house, knock it over, and have a bigger yard. Because we need big yards so we can raise weeds in the back. But
And pay property taxes.
and pay property taxes because we want to do our share. But the younger generation, and a lot of the people coming in now, they don't want big lots. They want a small lot that's easy to maintain, and they want to go do things that are more community centered. They want to go to a park. They want to have a dog park. They want to do things that are different. So if we can put more homes on an acre, and to Brad's point, land is very, very expensive. It's a huge cost on building the home, and it's very limited. There's only so much we can do. By being able to put more homes on an acre, it solves a couple of problems. Number one, it will lower the price of housing because that's one of the biggest costs in it. And number two, we actually hit what the market is asking for. So it's kind of a multiple thing. The problem now is getting city leaders that a lot of times are elected based on, well, here are my beliefs, here's what it should be. And they have to understand that their belief and their vision of a perfect community isn't wrong, but it's also not complete. I think Kate's example of Vineyard is outstanding. What a great community. And they have everything there. But that's what it takes nowadays. I still want my acre with my weeds in the back. And my son still wants a piece of property that has almost no land on it. And he'll come to my house and play in my backyard.
Ross, could you clarify what kind of weeds you're growing?
No, I can't. Because the laws have changed in Utah. So it could be almost anything, right?
All right. Thank you. Adrian, let's go to our next question.
Somebody needs to mute. So I think that probably the next question that feeds right into this is, I mean, you've been talking about what needs to happen, but is it politically feasible? What needs to happen in order to make it possible to get there?
Wow. Let me weigh in a little bit on that and then give our panelists a little time to think and see what they would say. I think this example that Kate's given us is really good. I've watched from a distance. Provo's not that far away from what's happening there. And I think it has everything to do with her mayor and city council and the vision that they have of that look long term. And I'm making guesses here because I haven't really talked to them, but I'm assuming they've also studied a little bit about what's going across the United States, what the trends are. My daughter lives up in Daybreak. My chief of staff on the line now lives up in Daybreak. It's a very attractive, high-density community. This is, to Ross's point, they're right in tune with what buyers want to buy, and most of them have very, very small yards. Some of them no yard at all, and some of them there's a lot of shared space. And they realize, wait, I don't have to mow it. I don't have to pay property taxes on it. But if I had shared space, it's just like I get to use it. And so I think a lot of it has to do with electing officials to our local government who will be visionary and who will study different trends that are out there and not just rely on, to pick on Ross a little bit, not just rely on Ross and his opinion, and that, I mean that in the general sense of people who are maybe seeing them at the grocery store and saying, oh, I got to have my acre lot. Well, I think that the elected officials have a responsibility to look out 20 years and really see. The other thing I'd point out that I think, Kate, these communities bring that you're discussing is, I know as mayor that we learned that it's not really in a neighborhood's best interest to have all the homes the exact same price. If they're all the exact same price, that means that you're bringing in everybody with the exact same demographic. And really what makes a wholesome community is some elderly, some young, some middle-aged, different income brackets. That's really what makes the most wholesome community. And that's the type of housing, I think, Kate, that you're seeing there is bringing in a wide array. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that question?
Congressman, I would like to just maybe echo and emphasize what you said, that I think it's really important that how you handle this is you elect the right people. It is really, really important that you get to know who's running for office, what they stand for, and what they want to see with your community. And not just from the local level, but all the way up through Congressman. Again, we're sitting here with Congressman Curtis this evening. Not all of the congressmen do this. Not all of them care. Not all of them see this as important. So everybody on the call and listening tonight, please understand we're right in front of an election, and it really is important. And it's not just important, all the drama that goes with the presidential debate. Super important. But everyone else, all the way down to your city councilman, will have huge impact on your community and your quality of life. Take the time and understand them.
Great.
If I could, sorry, I would like to add that Mayor Fulmer's had to defend a lot of her decisions. It was easy, I think, to zone this when nobody lived here. And then it was harder to talk about the choices that you had made when humans started moving in and started to have opinions about their own neighborhood. But I have really admired the way that they studied it. They used data and they used to justify their decisions, and they really stuck by what they had chosen to do, and they didn't compromise. And I think that when you go to look for an elected official, you need to see if they're pointing to the good examples or the bad examples, because it's really easy to point to a situation where something didn't work and say, see, it's always going to be like this. They have high density housing and it ruined their city, it ruined their state street. But there are plenty of examples of it going really, really well. And so I think just be careful about which elected officials you're voting for and which narrative they choose to go with, because if they're not presenting you with both options, they have an agenda. And so I would just to let you know that it works here. It's very cute. I would invite you to become my neighbor. It's the best.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, Adriel.
Okay, so Daniel Broadbent is asking, well, he says that wages are also going up. Is the cost of housing going up faster than wages are?
Dave, you want to take a swing at that?
I think I would say yes. I was going to look for some quick data on it to see if I had it on my phone. But I mean, just looking at say that one condo example, 90,000 10 years ago, 270 today. It's 300%. I'm 99% sure wages have not gone up 300% in 10 years. Even just year to year, we're seeing 10% appreciation right now. That means everyone's wages are going to have to be going up more than 10%. So we're just not seeing that, I don't think.
I think it's generally speaking, wages would track with inflation, which of course is very, very low, and maybe wages slightly outpace inflation. But you're right. I think you're lucky if your wages are going up 2-3% a year, and if your housing is going up 10%, and just the lumber alone that we've talked about today would increase those costs pretty dramatically. Dave, if you feel free to interrupt us if you do find something on your phone there that you want to share a little later.
Okay.
Good. Larry, did you want to say?
Maybe I can, Congressman. I did find it on my phone. Dave,
Okay.
This may have been what you were looking for. Our affordability index right now is as low as it's been since at least 2007, maybe even before that, meaning that the affordability of homes right now is far worse than it's been in the last decade and the last 15 years, and continues to be exaggerated. The example I mentioned earlier, you have a home come on the market in an affordable range, and you have 10 to 15 people bidding on that and pushing the price up dramatically in an instant. It's not waiting for inflation to push the price up. It's instantaneous. And many of these buyers who end up winning these bidding wars are willing to pay additional down payment in order to not worry about the appraisal. To get the appraisal in, and it's not as much as the purchase price is. Some of these buyers are willing to bring in money to make up the difference and be able to get the loan on the property. So it's instantaneous and it happens immediately, and that's what's making things so unaffordable. Just that instantaneous appreciation, so to speak, becomes very difficult.
Excellent. Thank you. Adriel?
Okay, I'd like to pivot, talk about something a little bit different. We've got Benjamin Donner, who is asking a question about Hill Air Force Base and the challenges for affordable housing for the Airmen. Benjamin, do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your own question? Okay, try now.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks,
Outstanding. No, thank you so much for letting me ask this question. So I'm the executive director of the American Red Cross over Northern Utah, and just had one of the most amazing conversations with our new wing commander and command chief at Hill Air Force Base. Sat down with them just a couple days ago, and we were talking about our partnership and support of our wonderful servicemen and women there at Hill Air Force Base. And I asked the wing commander, I asked her, what keeps you up at night? What's the biggest challenge that we can help? And it was surprising what she said, and it was specifically to our topic here, the affordable housing and safe housing for the airmen that cannot live on base. That base housing is completely maxed, and here we are, these amazing individuals that are serving us, helping us, doing everything in service of our community, but yet they can't find housing. They can't find safe areas to live. And the American Red Cross's mission is to alleviate human suffering. And it surprises me that it's in our own military right now. And so I pose that question, is there something that can be done? Any incentives, any programs that could be offered to landlords, et cetera? I don't have a specific solution yet, but what can we do to help these amazing military men and women that are serving us? Thank you so much for letting me ask.
Good. I'm not sure how our guests feel about their qualifications to weigh in on that. Do any of you do work up in the Ogden area and could maybe have some expertise and comment on that specific market? Benjamin, we might leave you without a good answer. And I would say there's probably a federal role in this one as well, because let's face it, if we're not paying our military men and women a wage that allows them to live in the communities where they're working, we have to address that on a federal level. I will tell you that the last few years, Congress has made a tremendous investment in our military pay, and it generally does lag behind. I think once again of our school teachers and others who do tremendous work and often take jobs that don't fairly compensate them for their work. And they're the people who I think who are being hurt the most. So I don't know, panelists, would you add anything to that at all? All right.
Okay. Congressman Austin Taylor's asking a question. I'd like to direct this question straight to you. He's wondering about federal action that would limit cities' ability to use zoning to create excessive regulations on development. Do you think that the federal government has a role there?
I don't, and I'll tell you why, Austin. Thanks, and hope you're doing well, Austin. I actually think that could possibly be a state issue. But if you think about, on a federal level, us trying to make a decision that is going to that impacts New York City and Monticello, you can see the vast difference of needs, and how in the world can we really legislate from Washington, D.C., and in a way that is the same for New York City and a city like Monticello. They're so radically different. So I actually wouldn't want to see the federal government engage at that level, because I just think there's no way we could get it right. There's a constant debate going on about state regulation versus city or county regulation. I know that as a mayor, we hated when the state told us what to do. I know the state hates when the federal government tells them what to do. And I think some of our panelists might argue, let me give you a chance, for a more uniform fill across the state if the state regulated some of these things. And imagine a builder trying to build in Vineyard and Provo and having totally different regulations and totally different standards. And there would be some sense to evening those out. Does anybody want to tackle that one about whether or not you'd like to see the state weigh in on that, or are you content to let the mayors and the county commissioners make those decisions?
I'll jump in on that one, since regulation's kind of my thing. So it's a discussion we've had a lot. I agree with you 100%. I can't think of anything that would be more frightening than the federal government coming and doing it. It's a big task, and it's a lot of moving parts, and the federal government is very, very far from what that is. But there are some things the state can do, and I don't know that they should come in and take it over, again, for the same obvious argument that every situation is different and it should be dealt with by whoever's closest to that. But some of the cities have more of the NIMBYs than others. And so to have some sort of a regulation or some sort of an incentive process that says, if you do a better job providing for affordable housing, you'd reduce regulation, you make it so that we can put that housing in that municipality, then there should be some reward. There should be something to encourage them to do that. But I don't think it would work well, and I have to be careful, I speak for a lot of people, but I think it would be hard for one overarching entity, be it the federal government or the state, to say, here, we're going to handle zoning for everything. But they could incentivize.
Yeah. Yes. Way in. Yes. I've found that the closer your form of government is to you, the more accountable they are. And so let me tell you what I mean by that. If the federal government passes a law and you don't like it, your ability to interact with those lawmakers, 435 of them across the country in the Congress and 100 in the Senate, is so low. Does it make sense? Your ability to really influence that and hold people accountable for that law is very, very low. Now, if it's on a state level, it gets a little bit better. And if it's on a county level, it's a little bit better. But I'll tell you what, on a city level, you have an immediate impact on accountability for those decisions made by the elected officials. Plus, you see them at the grocery store. You see them at the soccer game. You look them in the eye and say, you're killing me, right? You're killing me, Mayor. And I just think you get a far greater accountability. And so if your city has some ordinances that you don't like, I would really encourage you to engage with your elected officials to change those. I saw that done very effectively as mayor a number of times. And if they're not responsive, that's the beauty of elections and the ability to support those that you do like.
If I could jump in really quick, I think the state managed a really good balance with SB 34 in terms of incentives because we've seen the cities respond really well to it. It hasn't been very long. And so the outcomes of that we haven't seen. And the pandemic certainly has thrown a wrench in that. But one other aspect I think that maybe the state or the counties could be better at is encouraging regional planning. There are a lot of transportation costs or perceived costs that cities then pass on as impact fees that they could really mitigate if they would work together to build the road instead of one of them building the road and then another one building the same road just a little bit further away. So those are my 2 cents. But I think that SB 34 was a really good model for incentives, a carrot, not a stick.
Excellent. Good. Thanks, Adriel.
Okay, let's do one more question I think we'll have time for, and then we'll let you go ahead and wrap up, Congressman. So this question comes from Robert Todd. He's asking about the rising costs of lumber. Is that just a supply and demand issue, or are there other factors? And if there are other factors, what are they? And what's the percentage?
Good. Steve, you had brought that up. Do you want to take a first stab at that, and then we'll let some of our other panelists, if they want to head in?
Well, I'll give it a shot. So it's a broad issue, a really broad issue with a lot of different factors and influences. But I would say number one is supply and demand, at least in our area. There are areas of the country that lumber prices are coming down, but they use a different type of product. In our market, our framing lumber and most of the wood that we use is Douglas fir and larch that's coming from Canada and or the Northwest. But if we go to the south and back east, it's going to be southern yellow pine and other woods that are coming down in price and are a little more affordable. But there are also areas of the country where they're having a shortage of lumber that they can't even get the product to put a house together. So it's pretty broad and varied depending on area. In our area, I think one of the biggest issues that we have, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, we've got extremely low interest rates that everybody loves and a pent-up demand for housing. And as Dave has alluded to, they're willing to pay more for a house than the home is even worth to get it, because they can justify that a little bit in the fact that they've got such a low interest rate. I've heard the comment made many times over in the last few months, money is almost free today with the low interest rates. That mindset is that we're not going to be able to correct this market from a lumber standpoint or even any other materials. There's been word in just the last couple of days that we now have a cement powder shortage, which is going to drive up the cost of concrete. So it's not just lumber, and it's not just framing lumber. When we look at the wood index, it's all wood. There's a lot of wood used in a home that's not just framing. It's moldings, doors, decks, flooring. So it's a big, complicated piece. But in our niche in the market, supply and demand and a low interest rate is feeding this frenzy that's driving the costs up. And we can't solve a housing problem without building the units, and we keep building the units, so there's no incentive for a mill to lower the lumber cost. And I think that's probably the double-edged sword that we're dealing with most right at the moment.
Can I make a comment on that? On the federal side, we do have tariffs on Canadian lumber right now that the federal government is enforcing. And if those tariffs could be reduced or eliminated, it would dramatically help with the cost of lumber.
Brad, for clarification, are those in the new NAFTA and the MCA?
No, they're actually outside of the USMCA, Congressman. They were put in place before that new treaty was approved, but they are outside of that. They're, from what I understand, they're excluded from that, and they're a separate issue. Okay,
good to know. That's actually good news because it makes it more feasible that we could actually alter those. Very good. Dave, you look like you either had something to say or you're ready to move on. Okay. I'm really pleased. I'm gonna be honest with all of our guests on the line and with our speakers. I was a little intimidated by this town hall, and I know how to do a normal town hall and answer questions about, oh gosh, President Trump or the election and all of these things, and I wasn't quite sure how this was going to go. And my staff was a little uneasy, but I got to tell you, I'm really pleased, and I owe that to two things. One would be our guests who have so generously given us their time tonight, and the other would be our listeners who really provided us with some fantastic questions. And we were a little worried we'd get flooded with questions about the Supreme Court, or that we'd get flooded with questions, right, about China and things like that. And I'm just really pleased that this has been a really thoughtful discussion. Hopefully it's been a little bit helpful. Thank you to each of our guests that have been with us tonight for taking the time out of your evening. Thank you to those who are online listening. And once again, this has been a good experience and encourages me to keep doing more of these. Best to all of you, please stay safe and healthy. And we can look forward to the time when we can actually do this with all of us in the same room, hopefully very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.